I'm Deborah Bogar, facilitator for this one-hour NACD Urban and Community Conservation webinar on pollinator research. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted on NACD's website along with the presentation PDFs for your future access. Everyone should be connected online to see the presentation, and then you can access audio via your computer or phone, as in the directions that were sent with your confirmation email. The opening slide indicates all lines are muted except for the speakers. I'll open the chat room after both presentations so you can type in your questions and comments, and we'll take as many as we can. You might want to jot those down during the presentation. And in this webinar system, especially now since Adobe Connect's really being highly used, the transitions will take a little time as the slides load, so don't worry that it's your computer. We'll start with comments from our host, Ron Rohal, chair of NACD's Urban and Community Resource Policy Group, which is a subcommittee of our Natural Resources Policy Committee. Ron?
And good morning, and I welcome all of you to the monthly Urban and Community webinars offered by the National Association of Conservation Districts through the support of our sole sponsor, the Scotts Miracle-Gro Company. These sessions are designed by NACD's Urban and Community Resource Policy Group, a subcommittee of district officials and partners charged with guiding the association's services and support for districts' work in developed and developing areas. Our goal through these webinars is to help districts share what they are doing nationwide and enable them to learn from each other and various agencies and organizations. And we appreciate the support of the Scotts Miracle-Gro Company for making them possible. I invite you to let us know what you think about each webinar and what other topics you would like us to cover by contacting NACD staffer Deborah Bogar. And please tell our NACD officers what type of assistance you would like from your national association for urban and community conservation work. And now I'll hand it over to Deb for the introduction of our speakers.
All right, thanks, Ron.
You're welcome.
Whoops, clicking a little too quick there. Today we have two presentations, and then we'll also have some information about our current stewardship materials on this topic. Vera Pfeiffer is a postdoc working with Dr. Dave Crowder at the Washington State University's Department of Entomology. She conducts genetic and spatial analyses to learn about bumblebee foraging, resource use, health, and population processes. Next up will be Kelly Rourke, who has been dedicated to pollinator conservation for over 7 years. Her focus is on large-scale habitat projects, plant-pollinator interactions, and agricultural and industry engagement. Kelly serves on the board of directors for the Pollinator Partnership Canada, the advisory committee of the Monarch Joint Venture, and the steering committee for plant agents. And then, as I mentioned, we'll also have NACD staff members, Diana Blackwood, who is our stewardship and education coordinator, and she'll talk a little bit later about the materials that we have available. And with that, Vera, I'm going to load your slides, and when they come up on your screen, you can take it from there.
Right, great. Thank you, Deb. Hello, everyone. I really appreciate this opportunity to connect with the folks participating in the Urban and Community Conservation webinar series. The National Association of Conservation Districts is a deeply impactful organization for natural resources management, and it's a real pleasure to share some of my research results with you all, representing thousands of conservation districts who interact with millions of landowners across the country. As Deb said, I'm a postdoc researcher now at Washington State University, but I recently finished my PhD in Madison, Wisconsin, where I spent some time learning about urban bee communities and bumblebees in particular. So today I'm hoping to share a little bit from two chapters of my dissertation that focused on urban bee communities. And in my first chapter, I set out to learn about land cover and urban development and how they influence the whole community of bees. People are usually most familiar with colony bees like the European honeybee on the blue flower, the only bee species that's managed for honey production, and bumblebees up on the pink flower, our only genera of colony bees that's native to North America and many other places through the world. There are just, all these bee pictures are a lot for the system, I guess. Yeah, in the second column here, you can see carpenter bees, and they can be some of the biggest bees, like up on the lavender, and the tiniest bees on the knapweed below it. And but most bees are solitary nesting or solitary soil nesting bees, like the green bees in the left column and many others. All right. So in this first study, I caught bees at paired sites surrounded by high and low impervious surface all around the city. And I used the parcel data or the parcel ownership data set provided by the city to get in touch with landowners and request permission to sample at residential properties, commercial zones, and city parks and water management areas through the city. And there were bees all over. The patterns represented by the bee richness overall represent mostly these soil nesting bees and small solitary bees. And there was generally a positive influence of natural vegetation in the surrounding kilometer and also of impervious surface very locally. And some of these sites with low bee richness were developed very recently in the past decade or two. And in that project, I looked specifically at these 3 nesting guilds of bees. But we weren't really able to learn that much about bumblebees in particular. Bumblebees are bigger bodied and more mobile. They can fly longer distances foraging. And they tend to use excavated cavities like old rodent burrows for their habitat. So in my next study, I worked on a project to learn more about bumblebee foraging in particular. What aspects of floral resources drive the distribution of bumblebee foraging patterns has been a topic of great interest in the past decade. And before that, using colony assignment based on genetic sampling, several scientists, Chalene Jha and Claire Kremen, noticed longer foraging distances of bumblebees to facilitate visitation of species-rich patches, especially native plants. And then more recent work by Chalene Jha and her student Nathaniel Pope and others observed an overarching importance of floral cover and resource density. Brian Spiesman's study in Wisconsin grasslands noticed that bumblebee colonies grew larger when there was higher floral dominance. And the flowers in that study were typically goldenrod and cup plants growing in high density. Several studies emerging from arid climates in California and Texas show longer trips in the dry late summer when resources are difficult to come by. But this is not unexpected. It's usual that mechanisms act in concert to generate ecological patterns, and the main relationships that control the patterns of foraging likely shift in different contexts. Studies are often conducted in particular ecotypes or climatic regions to estimate the most important effects just across that scope of their study extent. So for this study, my hypotheses were that increased floral cover and density, as well as species richness, and especially prairie and lawn species richness, increase the number of foraging bumblebees. And then also, I expected that the influence of floral resource variables might exhibit non-stationarity, meaning the effect of these variables might differ across the study extent due to the local floral resource context. So for this study, I overlaid a grid across the city of Madison that included agricultural, commercial, and residential zones, as well as city parks and natural areas. And over 2 summers, I walked a transect in each grid cell and estimated 4 explanatory variables to describe the floral resources. To summarize these transects here, you can see some bars indicating the number of agricultural transects in green, yellow the commercial transects, purple the parks, and red the residential transects. And then I mapped bees along the transects as points. And so in these plots on the upper left, you can see that in the top left, you can see the more uniform distributions of floral cover in agricultural and park transects compared to commercial and residential transects with a lot of low floral cover values. And also in the second row, you can see that commercial and residential transects had a bit higher total number of floral morphospecies, while the number of wild and prairie species was greater in agricultural and park transects. So here was the big main result for my test for hypothesis 1, where I compared the influence of these floral resource variables across my study extent using a generalized linear regression model. Regression models are useful tools in statistics to contrast hypothesized mechanisms and test how much variance is explained by different factors. And so in these plots on the top right, you can see the percent increase in bees per transect with in terms of the raw units of these variables, like percent cover or one additional flower richness or floral species or wildflower species. And we could see this general positive effect of these floral resource variables, as well as this additional effect of the land use category. We saw about twice as many bees on the transects in commercial and residential zones, and about 4 times as many compared to the agricultural transects and parks. So those were the average effects across the whole study extent. But then in my second hypothesis, I wanted to investigate how the effect sizes of these floral variables might differ across the study extent. So I used a type of analysis called geographically weighted regression, where you fit a linear model around for a small neighborhood of points. And in that model, the close points are weighted more heavily than the further away points, even within that small neighborhood. And so you end up estimating an effect size for each pixel or each transect across the whole study extent. So here, you can see the first 2 results. In the top plots, you can see the raw data plotted for cover and floral density. And the strongest trend here is the positive effect of floral cover, and it's especially amplified in this area under I guess like the bottom left. You can see this very strong green area of cover, and that area includes the extensive prairie restoration of the University of Wisconsin arboretums, and the really positive effect of that rich and abundant resource for the bees that resulted in this very, very strong positive effect size estimate for floral cover. Here in this second slide, you can see the raw data for species richness and prairie and lawn species richness plotted in the top plots, and then the effect sizes plotted in the lower plots. And while the effects were overall positive in the global model, you can see, and across the study extent, you can see 2 areas in which you see a negative effect of overall species richness and simultaneously a very, very positive effect of prairie and lawn species richness. So in some of these areas with very large extents of prairie restoration or like clover fields around schools, there was this very strong effect of those more wild species compared to just the overall species richness. So in summary, for hypothesis 1, we did see that flower cover and richness and prairie and lawn species richness in particular increased the number of foraging bumblebees. But the influence of the floral resource variables did differ across the extent, and floral cover was the most pervasive, strong influence. But the influence of native plant species richness stood out where there were large restored prairies that offered this really important and rich resource for the bees. Within the survey, just to summarize which bees were the favorites around Madison, 14 floral morpho species, sometimes it's more than one species, achieved over 1% of the bee visits, which amounted to 70% of the data set of visits. And so goldenrod, white clover, thistles, and bee balm were the top plants visited. You can see some of these others that were also very popular: garden mint, spirea, coneflowers, silphiums like cup plants, Russian sage, firstfoot trefoil. Some of these are like knapweed are very weedy species, while other ones we think of as like those really beautiful native prairie plants like the coneflowers and such. All right. Well, with that, thank you very much for the opportunity to share this work with you all. I couldn't have done this work without my PhD advisor, Janet Silvernagel, and other committee members and lab members. And I can take any questions, or I guess we'll do questions at the end. Is that right, Deb?
That's correct. Yep. We'll go ahead with our next presentations, and then we'll take the questions. So thank you, Vera. Appreciate that. And Kelly, I'm now going to load your slides.
Okay.
Hopefully they'll come up a little bit quicker than, there we go. All yours when it comes up on your screen.
Okay, great. I'll just take this time to introduce myself. So first, just want to say thank you so much for joining us today on this webinar series, and thanks for Deb for organizing, and thank you to Vera for such a great presentation that I'll be following. Mine will be a little less technical, but I'm here to talk to you about our, I work for Pollinator Partnership, and we're a nonprofit organization, and we have a program called Monarch Wings Across America. So I'm here to tell you about that program, which has a few different components, mostly restoration-based. And here we go. So I will just dive right in here. So again, Pollinator Partnership, we're a 501c3 nonprofit. We are North American scoped, but we are based out of San Francisco, California. And we work to protect pollinators through habitat creation, collaboration, education, sound science, and sensible public policy. So we are working to protect all pollinators. So we just learned about some great native bee species, and at Pollinator Partnership, we're working with those as well as all of the other pollinating animals throughout North America, of which there are many. And as I'm sure many of you know, pollinators and actually insects in general are in decline. So these are just some graph examples of some trends and sadly some declines in populations of different pollinators. So the top two graphs are looking at both the upper left is looking at the western migration of the monarch butterfly. So there are counts taken that the Xerces Society leads during Thanksgiving at their overwintering grounds on the California coast. And you can see from this graph that there's been severe declines in their overwintering numbers throughout the past 20 years. On the upper right-hand side, the blue graph, this is a very similar data set that's looking at the central migration of the monarch butterfly population that overwinters in Mexico. And again, quite significant declines there. Bottom left, you're looking at bumblebee status assessment, and this really shows that 1/4 of all bumblebee species are in a threatened or near threatened category. And bottom right, managed honeybees, which are not native to the United States, but are clearly very integral to our agricultural system, are experiencing declines as well. Particularly, this one's looking at the overwintering losses of honeybee colonies. So again, here to talk to you about monarch wings across America. So looking at the monarch butterfly, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with because it's a very beautiful, vibrant, and iconic species of pollinators. And we're going to be talking about both the eastern and western migration of this species today. So going to start out with monarch queens across Ohio, which was how our monarch queens across America initiative really took flight. So just a brief program overview. This was created in response to the presidential directive on supporting the monarch migration, which came out of the Obama administration in 2013. So this really was a presidential memorandum with an action plan for all federal and private citizens to focus on protection and promotion of honeybees, monarch butterflies, and other pollinators. So we got together a diverse coalition of partners to install monarch habitat research plots across the partners' lands in the following settings: urban ecosystems, agriculture, corporate lands, and public gardens throughout the state of Ohio. And just to kind of summarize some of the achievements, we had 18 plots established throughout Northeast Ohio. We actually had put in place a Monarch Queens Across Ohio specialty license plate, which actually the proceeds from go back into monarch conservation programs. And we did, of course, have 3 years of data collection. So our protocol was to visit each plot once a month. And the data resulted in, and we're really looking at plant-pollinator interactions and preference of monarch butterflies, which species that they preferred. And data resulted in the findings for native plant preference for monarchs and other pollinators, and informed technical guides for land managers. So these are some snapshots of the covers of these guides that we put together. And they are for corporate lands, rights-of-way, farms, and then we do have another one for gardens that we just finished. And these are really to provide all these different sectors with the tools needed to install and maintain habitat for monarch butterflies. And it's all based on the research and preferential data that we collected at our research plots. Okay, so then kind of the next sector of this Monarch Queens Across America broad program is Monarch Queens Across California, which is a relatively new project out here in my home state of California. And I wanted to show this map. If you're not familiar, there are 2 relatively distinct populations of the monarch butterfly. There is a little bit of overlap, however, but we're going to be focusing on the western population here, which summers actually up near Vera in Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and then really comes over the Sierra Nevada mountains to overwinter on the coast of California. So our objectives here were to establish long-term habitat sites for migrating monarchs in California, to gather an improved understanding of migration patterns and forage requirements for California monarch butterflies, and to collect California monarch habitat restoration data to inform restoration efforts and indicate potential seed sources for future projects. And I do want to mention that this was supported from the Wildlife Conservation Board, Monarch Joint Venture, and the Hillsborough Garden Club. So this just shows a little snapshot of some of the progress that we made and kind of an in-action snapshot of us creating habitat for monarchs. This one picture is actually from a vineyard winery in Sonoma, California, and we did quite a sizable plot there with 16 different species of both native nectar and native milkweed species of plants. So as you may know, the milkweed species are host plants for monarch butterflies, so they are what monarch butterfly adult females will lay their eggs on, and then the caterpillars will then eat. So really, really important for monarch habitat, and as well as the nectar plants that really fuel their migration, give them that rich sugar nectar so that they have fuel to make their migration. So we, in our first year, we created 30 long-term monarch butterfly habitat and research plots, monitoring underway at those. We also have 3 more plots that are going to be installed in fall of 2020. We engaged over 50 individuals in planting, demonstration, and activities.
Uh-oh. like we've lost Kelly's audio connection, so folks, if you'll wait for just a moment here, we'll see if we can get her back. Let me try giving her the number here. Oh, there we go.
Hello?
All right, Kelly, looks like we've got you back.
Okay, good, great. And you can hear me, right?
We can hear you fine, yeah?
Okay, good. Okay, sorry about that. No idea what happened there, but I think I know where it cut out, so I will just continue on. Thanks for bearing with me. Okay, so upcoming for Monarch Wings Across California, we are hiring a part-time coordinator to champion this project out here. We will be conducting monitoring through March of 2022. And we are also creating demonstration plots for landowner workshops. So not only are we installing habitat and doing research, we also want to conduct these workshops, technical assistance for private landowners primarily, but also public land managers, to really take them through the steps of identifying sites for possible habitat, in prepping, installing, and maintaining this type of habitat. And we'll also be doing large-scale seeding to enhance 3,000 acres in the Central Valley, which is a really critical geographic area for the western migration. Since it is primarily dominated by large-scale agriculture, there are few habitat and resting spots for the monarch butterfly as they're coming out over to the coast. Okay, so next I'm going to shift gears, taking you all to the Midwest and talking about a different project underneath our Monarch Wings Across America program. This is Monarch Wings Across the Eastern Broadleaf Forest, and this program actually concluded last year, and it took the approach of a eco-regional habitat approach. So really looking at we focuses on the Bailey's ecoregion structure for plant communities. And so you can see an example of this here. This is developed by the USDA Forest Service. So we were conducting work in Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Missouri, and Arkansas, all of which overlap at least partially with this ecoregion. And so we established a seed collection and plant material development program. Our goal was to provide technical guidance and educational support for public and private land managers, with the goal of securing a minimum of 4,688 acres of long-term monarch habitat. And we did this in conjunction with many partners and through funding from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. So seed collection and volunteer training was key to this project, and we could not have done it without all of our many fantastic volunteers, many of which I think were NACD members as well. So we created a seed collection protocol that was based off the Seeds of Success model through BLM. We conducted in-person workshops and online trainings. We trained 327 volunteers, which equated to 2,792 volunteer hours, 368 seed collections, and 100 pounds of clean seed. We also did workshops for habitat management and technical training. So this is more so for land managers. We did 5 habitat management workshops across the region, 1 in each state. 175 public agency and private land managers participated and were trained. And we also created a 7-part habitat creation and management webinar series. There's a little screenshot of it here, but this is available at our website, pollinator.org, and anyone can view it. And it's split up into sections, so you can kind of find what your best interest or need is and get educated on a particular topic. So the goal, of course, is to secure the long-term habitat and enhance the habitat for monarchs. So we actually went out and did site visits. We did 97 habitat evaluation and consultation visits in one summer. So one of our staff members traveled over 6,000 miles driving around and doing these consultations. We awarded plant materials, so from the seed that was collected by our volunteers and then cleaned by a nursery partner. We then distributed the plant material out to 65 projects. So that 100 pounds of seed, we actually grew out a portion of it into about 11,500 plugs. And we also were able to distribute some financial awards for other management control, like invasive species control. So we really were able to impact many projects throughout this ecoregion. So I remember how our goal was 500 or about 5,000 acres. We actually were able to secure nearly 30,000 acres signed into long-term habitat agreements. So we very much surpassed our goal there. This is just an example of some of the 97 site visits that we conducted. And then I want to take you to the next and final portion of our Monarch Wings Across California, or sorry, Monarch Wings Across America program. This now, we were lucky to get an extension, an expansion for our National Fish and Wildlife Foundation funded project. And we expanded into some new states to do regional seed collection, native plant material development across the Midwest and Great Lakes. So the goals goals and objectives here were to increase quality, quantity, and connectivity of habitat across the Midwest and Great Lakes region, to provide increased floral resource benefits for monarchs, rusty patch bumblebees, and other rare pollinators. So the NIFWF priorities shifted and became a little bit more broad in this funding cycle, so we were able to target bombus species as well as other pollinators, imperiled pollinators of the region. The goal to make 1,000 seed collections, collect 250 pounds of clean seed, and secure 10,000 acres of long-term habitat. So again, here are some of our wonderful partners. And here's our project region. So we moved away from the eco-regional focus to state-based. And so we're actually still working in Arkansas, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Minnesota, Missouri, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. So this is both critical habitat for the monarch's central migration, as well as historically at least the range for the rusty patch bumblebee, which is now protected under the Endangered Species Act. So with the goal of increased floral resources, we refined and expanded our target species list. So you can see the species here, and we increased it to 29 species, 5 milkweed species, 1 woody species, and then the rest are native nectar plants. When you're creating a target species list, you want to think about some of these key components. Species that cover full bloom periods, so throughout the season as much as possible, having something in bloom. You want species that are widely distributed for seed collection efforts because you want people to be able to find them, and you want them to have robust enough populations that you're not taking away from the the set too much, so commonly occurred. You want to consider a coefficient of conservatism. And we also worked with our partners and advisors to rigorously vet this species list to make sure it would work for all the states, which was quite a ambitious task. With our volunteer training, we taught them plant identification, how to scout a population, seed collection best management practices, so based on the SOS protocol. We taught them viability testing, so if the seed was going to be viable to germinate and propagate. We taught them a data collection protocol, which I'll go into a little bit later, and how to label, dry, and ship the seeds. So these top kind of 3 photos are of our seed collection manual and plant profiles that we put together. So we gave really detailed information of, how to find these species and what they could maybe be confused with, and proved to be very helpful. So the seed collection protocols, again, based on SOS, you want to collect from populations in excess of 50 individuals in the field. Collect only 20% of viable seed, available day of collection. Collect widely throughout the whole site, so not just staying in one spot. You want to aim for high genetic diversity within collections, so include plants growing in different microhabitats throughout the site, and include plants that differ in appearance, size, and stature. And of course, really important is come clean, leave clean. You don't want to be tracking and carrying different biological material around with you to different sites. So we do have our volunteer online training portal. So you actually can get trained in the seed collection protocol and become a volunteer all online. Especially important right now since we're all sheltering in place. We did have plans to do in-person workshops again this year, but if that doesn't happen, we do have this online resource available. The website's down there, pollinator.org. And this is just an example of the seed collection and redistribution zones. So we did base this off of vegetation zones, and we also split them for the northern states in like Wisconsin and Michigan by glacial lines. So really trying to maintain the ecotype sourcing of these seeds. We also created a seed collection app, and this is through Survey 123 through ArcGIS, and it allowed us to capture GIS coordinates for seed collections, create a database for site and plant photos, and it also is really key in helping with our distribution effort, so we know where seeds came from and can be redistributed back to. And this is just some screenshots of the app, so you can see it's all geolocated through Google Earth, and you can upload photos and select from our plant profiles of which species you're collecting. So we do have, of course, the goal of collecting or impacting 10,000 acres of long-term habitat. We have an online habitat survey that you can fill out if you feel that you may have a collection location or a project location that could be one that could receive plant material. Again, we do have these in-person site visits that hopefully will happen this year, and we do, with all of these, hope that the landowners will keep the habitat in place for at least 5 years. So this is a screenshot of our habitat survey, again, at pollinator.org. And I'll just end by offering for you all to join us in this effort. So through these training materials, you can gain skills in education in native plant and pollinator conservation. You may be able to fill volunteer requirements, gain an understanding of the vegetation community, connect to the broader pollinator wildlife conservation community, and contribute to landscape-scale habitat projects aimed to restore connectivity of vital native habitat. And then lastly, the potential to receive native plant materials and management recommendations for your land. So again, visit our website and you can check it out. And that's all I have, so thank you very much.
All right, excuse me. Thank you, Kelly. Great information there, too, and I look forward to the Q&A. Before we do that, we're going to have Deanna Blackwood from NACD talk a little bit about the pollinator educational materials that we have available for our Stewardship Week. So, Deanna, when the first slide comes up on your screen, you can take it from there.
Great. Can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Well, hello everyone. As Deb mentioned, my name is Diana Blackwood, and I'm the NACD Stewardship and Education Coordinator with the NACD. And today, I'd like to introduce you our new Pollinator Field Day Curriculum Guide. The development of the guide was possible thanks to the David Rockefeller Fund and the Pollinator Partnership. So thank you, Kelly. I'm glad you're today with us. This guide is a really great opportunity to get youth outdoors and engage them in the natural world. And I'll be explaining a little bit more about what's inside the guide and how to use it. So what's inside? What can you find inside? Within the guide, which is color-coded just like the slide, there is an introduction to the content explaining what a pollinator field day is, how to reach out to volunteers, build community partnerships, and create a really and exciting day for everyone involved. There is also some information about what a conservation district is and how you can get connected with your conservation district in your area to build some relationships and create connections in order to make your field day more real. There is also detailed information on how you can use the guide and information on correlation to the next generation science standards. All the lessons in the guide are correlated to the next generation science standards that many states have adopted. So all this information is contained in the introduction section to the guide. Next, there is a lot of information how to plan and implement a field day. So there is a really great information how you can actually plan the field day. So whether you're a professional who's used to bring youth outdoors and doing similar events and activities, or this is something relatively new to you and your organization, we've included a number of tips to make this as easy as possible. There are instructions and a whole wide variety of ways you can set up the field day. The content is really for like anybody and everybody to be able to do this at their side. There is a lot of great information on how to make connections with your conservation district and NRCS offices and other partners who will really be able to highlight some of their careers in conservation and also bring some expertise to your event. We've included a wide variety of tips around organization and setups, how to train volunteers and facilitators, how you can run this event to make sure it runs smoothly, and of course, backup plans in case something goes wrong. The next section, the pre-field day lessons. The lessons are divided into grade groups for K2, 3-5, and 6-8. They can be adapted for use for a variety of ages, and within these lessons, we have structured them using something called the E5 model, which is explore, explain, engage, evaluate, and expand. Built in each lesson, there is an evaluation and a way to extend that lesson, whether that's going on an additional field trip or you're going to bring in a professional or expert in the field. And there's lots of ways to extend this content. The lessons are really designed to ensure that students are participating, generating questions, and guiding the conversation. So here I want to show you an example of one of the pre-field day lessons look like. And you will notice that we've included the alignment to the next generation science standards, the time it takes to do the lesson, all the materials that you'll need, some background information, what students will do during the lesson, and of course the 5 E's, engage, explore, explain, elaborate, and evaluate. So let me go back. So the fun part of the Pollinator Guide are the stations. There is a number of stations that you can utilize either in a field day or independently. Each station includes the materials you'll need, background information, the instructions, and the evaluations. These field day stations are really meant to be engaging and student-centered, so the person who's running it is facilitating that learning and that knowledge. And again, they can be used together, separately. You can use some of them or all of them. In the post-field day lesson section, there are 2 lessons for each grade category, K2, 3, 5, and 6, 8. Each of these lessons focus on some different standards, so not science. We're looking here at English language, arts, and communications. So things like reading, for example, some posters to share knowledge. These lessons focus on students gaining knowledge and then share it with others and their community. There is also some easy supplementary content that you can access, and these include crossword puzzles, spelling challenge, word search, coloring pages, things that might be nice to do on a rainy day, for example. Regarding extension activities, we included a number of ways to extend that learning, and a lot of these are community engagement type projects that are meant not to only extend the learning for the students that you work with, but to hopefully connect them to their community and connect them to their place. So whether that's planting a pollinator garden, working to build a garden that will attract native pollinators in your area, participating in a community science project, field trips to places like nature centers or farms to see conservation in action, or doing things to protect pollinators like building bee homes, for example. There is lots of ways to extend the learning past those initial lessons. And the last, in the appendices, there are some outreach letters that you can use to parents and guardians to share a community field day, maybe generate some support for the volunteers, and to share the work that you're doing. We also included a sample letter that you can use for outreach to a community group. We know that sometimes the time is really limited when it comes to setting up things like that, so you want to make sure that you have all the content you need to set up a field day and make it as successful as possible. Also in the appendices, you'll find a vocabulary list and a number of resources that can be accessed digitally. Individuals that you might want to reach out to supplement your learning for the pollinator field day. So to summarize, this guide was written so that anyone can implement a field day with no issues. We've got a really good troubleshooting guide for how to have a field day outside, how to make sure you have plans in case of inclement weather, how to reach out to people in your community. There are pre- and post-field day lessons, field day stations, some great supplementary content, extensions, and appendices with a lot of really great information, including multiple resources, many of which are available for free. The really great thing about the guide is that it can be used to design and implement a field day, or the lessons can be used independently, whether those are pre or post lessons or the pollinator field day stations. So there's a wide variety of information that you can use to get students outside and get them connected to pollinators in the environment. So the guide can be very easy accessed. It can be downloaded for free as a PDF from our Conservation Education Hub at nacdnet.org/Conservation Education Hub. You'll notice on our hub that the Pollinator Guide has its own webpage, and additionally to the guide itself, which can be downloaded both in color and black and white versions,
There are other supplementary resources that you can easily access, share, and promote in your community. Materials such as a blog post, some graphics that you can share on your website and social media, a flyer that you can use to distribute at your meetings or send it to schools and church groups. And lastly, this week we'll have uploaded a recorded presentation of the guide delivered by the curriculum specialist, and she will also put together a video demonstrating 2 activities from the guide that you can use in your backyard, for example, engaging siblings and families in the circumstances that we're right now. So I'll end here. If you have questions about the guide, please contact me directly or email any of us here at NACD. So thank you.
All right. Thanks so much, Deanna. With all this great information from our 3 presenters, I'm hoping we have some really good questions and comments. So I'm opening up the chat room, and hopefully it's coming up on everybody's screen here, possibly a little bit slow. Looks like we have some coming in. While we're waiting for those, let me pose a question to both Vera and Kelly. In your work that you did, the research and then the monarch across America that Kelly's been doing, it sounds like you've been working with homeowners and landowners. How did you identify them and recruit their interest? So let's start with Vera, and then we'll go to Kelly.
Yeah, so for my first project where I did extensive sampling at residential parcels and also commercial lots and the city parks, or it was actually city engineering often, like water management areas. For my study design, I wanted some randomness in where I was sampling. So I located some sites that were distributed around the city as was best for my study, and then downloaded the city parcel data, which has the property ownership listed, and then just Googled all of those people or the closest neighboring properties if I couldn't figure out a way to get in touch. So it tended to be like a lot of people who still had landline numbers available that are like listed online or in public sources that I got in touch with for the residential properties. And then for like parks and commercial lots, it was like easier to just Google and contact the property owners.
Okay, thanks. And Kelly, for your projects or for the Pollinator Partnership projects across the country?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's kind of 2 ways we engaged the public and residential homeowners. So one was through the seed collection network. So we invited people to become seed collectors and get trained through our materials. And that really we started by reaching out to our existing membership through Pollinator Partnership. We've been around for about 20 years, so we do have a good membership base and a good social media following. So we targeted our outreach within the states or the geographic area we were looking in, and that was kind of where we started. And then we actually really relied heavily on our partners within the state to provide contact lists or just ideas of places we could reach out to. So we kind of just built an initial outreach contact list, and then we do have a form on our website where people can fill out just really simple form to get more information and be included on our outreach list. So that's for seed collection. And then for the habitat sites, both for collecting the seed and for receiving plant material, we also have a survey on our website. We call it our habitat survey, and that's where we've gotten, I think, over 5,000 responses on that. So we've shared that throughout our similar networks, and then people are able to fill that out, tell us about their different land types, you know, how many acres they have, what's existing vegetation on the landscape, if they're part of a different conservation program, things like that, so we can then go through and kind of vet it electronically first. So that was kind of our approach.
Okay, very cool. All right, well, it looks like we have a number of questions and comments, so I'll read these out loud and then direct them to the speaker I think appropriate, and then the other one, feel free to speak up if you wish afterwards. So from Teresa, can a wetland be turned into a habitat? I'm going to direct that to Kelly, and then Vera, if you have comments afterwards.
Sure. Yeah, so I think a wetland is a habitat, depending on what you're looking at. Habitat for pollinators. A lot of riparian areas and wetland areas are great habitat for pollinators, for different species, definitely. But there are quite a few high moisture tolerant plants, particularly for monarchs. Actually, there's a swamp milkweed species that would be really good in a wetland type area. So yeah, I think it definitely can be. It's just you need to be specific about the plant habit and what they can withstand in terms of moisture.
All right, great. So then Mary Ellen asked for Vera's contact information, and then I switched early to this page. So all three of our speakers' contact info is showing right now. From Diane, is it possible to get the seed collection workshop materials if we wanted to do something similar? And Kelly?
Yeah, so all of our materials are on our website, so they are available. We have a webinar series you can view through YouTube or just directly on our website. We have all of our seed collection protocol as well as the plant profiles available for download. So you can get it all there. I will say it's definitely, you need to be within our geographic focus area because the species are particular to these states. And if you were looking to kind of take our materials and do a workshop of your own, I think that's a possibility. We've helped people do that in the past, but it's something we'd like to guide you on. So I would say email me if that's something you'd want to do.
All right. From Melissa, regarding land management terms, is that for private landowners or state and county as well? I'm thinking, Kelly, that goes to you.
Yeah, so land management terms, for both. So we worked on private land, so usually agricultural landowners, but then state and county for sure, even up to national wildlife refuges as well. So it really is all public-private land management. All
right. And then, Melissa, if there was something more detailed you wanted, you can resubmit a question. From Doug, anybody have guidance for planting of milkweed in or around livestock producers? Milkweed is poisonous to some livestock species, right? So, Kelly?
Yep. Yeah, so there's some studies about this as well as some kind of educational one-pagers. I know the Monarch Joint Venture has a one-pager about this, so I would definitely check out those resources. But kind of ultimately, yes, it's true that milkweed can be poisonous or a little bit toxic to livestock. But with our experience with working with landowners, especially out here in California, many of which are grazing and rangelands, they're really not worried about it. Cattle aren't going to feed on milkweed unless there's absolutely nothing else to eat. So they're pretty smart animals, and it's really not come into much concern as far as I know.
Okay. From Jessica, and this is for Vera, you mentioned lawn prairie plant resources. What kinds of lawn are you referring to? They seem very different from each other.
Yeah, that's so sorry. I didn't really introduce that categorization of the flower species, the flower resources in my study. But right, it's kind of complicated to make broad categories of plants. And there's a lot of literature on native versus non-native species in the pollinator literature. And so I just categorized all the species that I was seeing into three groups. lawn, prairie, and garden. And for the lawn, and that was mostly to try to separate the more the more like so a lot of the residential properties had a lot of these like sometimes hybrids, horticultural varieties of plants, which might have less like or like maybe some of them are sterile. I don't know. But I wanted to sort of separate that from the wildflowers, and so this was like a little bit difficult for me to start to tease apart. And so I grouped these. The lawn species were species that tended to like grow back some of them are not native but grow wild very frequently, and so those were ones that I'd expect to see on the road edges in mowed areas that just keep coming back so easily. So like the clovers, bird's-foot trefoil, the sweet clover, phlox, occidentalis, just ones that were just always there basically. Serasium, trifolium, the plantains, the little that look kind of grassy, and then the prairie species were like Queen Anne's lace, the thistles and rudbeckia, and or like black-eyed Susans and daisies, Orygeron, Achillea, Monarda. Some of these plants that require that don't really grow in these mowed, weedy areas. And then I had the garden species for a lot of these morpho species, which I couldn't always even identify as species, especially if they're some of these more horticultural varieties. But yeah, so when I was trying to contrast like more the more wildflowers versus the total morpho species richness, I'd group those like lawn and prairie species and then the garden species.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Vera. This next one will be for Deanna. Washington schools are closed for the rest of the school year. How can I adapt the NACD Pollinator Field Guide for home?
Yes. So as I mentioned in my presentation, the guide was designed not to only be used for field days, but you can pick and choose the lessons individually and use those at home. The materials are really easy to be found in like any stores. It's nothing very fancy. And again, we'll have a video by the end of this week demonstrating 2 activities from the guide, and you can use that video to send it to the teachers and your school, and they can work with the kids to do those activities, for example, in the backyard, engaging their siblings and parents. So again, it's very simple to adapt to any conditions, and materials that are used are very easy to be accessed in any store.
All right. Thanks, Deanna. We're after the hour here. I'm going to try and take maybe just 2 more of these. Teresa's had corrected one of hers, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up. So I'm going to do Teresa's last one. She says the wetland area she was referring to was designated as wetland, and she's concerned about the invasives and how we can develop it, I'm assuming, for pollinators. Will chemicals be an issue in a wetland?
Mm-hmm.
Anybody want to, do you want to address that?
Yeah, I would say this definitely isn't my area of expertise, wetlands. However, I do know they are under strict regulation, definitely, and I think it does depend on where you're located. But so yes, I think you have cause to be concerned and go about it carefully. I would I would reach out to a local Fish and Wildlife or a Partners for Fish and Wildlife program biologist to get some advice. Chemicals would definitely be an issue if you're looking to use something like glyphosate near the wetlands. I know there are preferred chemicals to be used near wetlands that are less water soluble, so it is possible, but it does need to be done very carefully, and I would definitely recommend reaching out to an expert on that.
That's a good recommendation there. And then our final one here from Stacy. On a web meeting yesterday, someone mentioned being on a task force for Governor Inslee in Washington for pollinator education and conservation. could not get any more info. Do we know of any pollinator conservation efforts at the state level? And do they know that the Department of Transportation has done some great work and great resources? So we'll go to both Vera and Kelly on this. Vera, just because you're located there in Washington, in case you have any insight, and then Kelly, because of the work done there. So Vera?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I actually don't have any additional information about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And Kelly, any thoughts?
I think I'm also not super sure. I know that each year for Pollinator Week, Pollinator Partnership does reach out to the governors of every state, and we have been successful in the past 5 years of getting proclamations from every state governor. So I know that it is, on the agenda in terms of Washington State's kind of conservation plan, but I don't know of anything specific, unfortunately.
Okay. I might suggest, Stacy, if you're with a local conservation district, you might reach out to your state association staff and see if that's something that they can help guide you to. And then Diana offers something about NRCS and the Department of Transportation are partnering, but she's not aware of a state-level effort. So thank you, Diane. And then we have a couple of comments about thank yous and this being a great webinar. With that, I agree with our participants. This has been a really great webinar. And I'm going to go ahead and close out here now. I want to say a huge thank you to Vera and Kelly and Deanna for presenting here and sharing your information. And I'll remind our folks that we have some resources on the NACD website at the link there, and we also have a Urban and Community Conservation Network on Facebook at that link there. And then finally, I invite everyone to join us back next month. We'll be looking at stormwater management efforts by districts in California and the state of Washington, and that'll be held on May 21st. So again, thank you to our speakers and to our participants, and we look forward to seeing you next month. Bye now.